Take my lips and speak through them. Take our ears and hear through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire with love for thee. May I speak in the name of the living God. Amen. We're in the middle of the Democratic and Republican conventions here in the United States. Two presidential candidates and their running mates are vying for our attention, our hearts, and our votes. During these conventions, people from all around the country tell us how they feel about the candidate, who they think he is. They hope we'll be persuaded to give their candidate power over our lives, over our country's priorities, at home and abroad. In short, they hope we'll vote for him. Songs are sung, speeches made, but the time comes when it's down to us. When we're poised over that ballot, it stops being about who other people say a candidate is. At the moment of truth, the only thing that matters is who we say he is. Our answer tells us not only about who the candidate is, but about who we are. We are revealed by our choices. We are known by the company we keep. This is a timely gospel this morning, Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 to 20. Jesus has taken his disciples outside of Israel again. They're in Caesarea Philippi, standing in the shadow of ancient temples to Syrian and Greek gods. The sources of the Jordan River rise here in a cave in a mountain, bringing rich memories of Jewish history. The city itself was founded by Herod's son, Philip, and was the seat of his administration. It held a great marble temple dedicated to Caesar's godhead, glistening in the sun. The whole place spoke of the human quest for God, ancient deeps, and of the political powers that be. Into this compelling context, Jesus brings his disciples, asking them, "What are people saying about me? Who do people say that I am?" It would seem an extraordinarily vulnerable, if not foolish, thing to do, to be a penniless, itinerant Jewish preacher standing amidst all this glory and asking such a question. But Jesus' time is growing short, and the question is very much on his mind. They answer him, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah or Jeremiah or one of the prophets. This was, so far as it went, a positive response. He was way up there in the polls, Elijah was Israel's greatest prophet, and both he and Jeremiah were considered forerunners of the Messiah. Something big was going on with Jesus. People knew that. They just didn't know what. So they reached for the highest human categories they had. But it wasn't enough. If God had not revealed who Jesus was to the disciples, if they too did not understand who he was, all might be lost. So Jesus took it all in and then asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" It really is the question, isn't it? For the disciples and for us. Who do you say that Jesus is? Peter has his answer. Undistracted by the relics to ancient religion or to Caesar's awesome power, he has eyes only for Jesus. "You are the Messiah," he says, "the Son of the living God." Wow, what a breathtaking response, and Peter is the first to make it. Jesus exclaims, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. God bless you. You didn't read this in a book. God revealed it to you. And I will share with you who you really are. You are a rock. And on this rock I'll build my church, and the powers of death will not prevail against it." Wow, it was a tremendous moment, of affirmation and connection, and how deceptively unimportant it had to have looked to passersby. Don't be fooled by appearances, friends. It's not what other people say about Jesus that really matters. It's what we say about him that matters. But who do you say that I am? It's not just a spiritual question either. This has real world implications. We know that because of where Jesus decided to ask it. At the intersection of Caesar's imperial and religious power, he asks in the midst of all the claims to power that allegiance to Jesus will bring them up against. You know, Jesus has a point of view. Jesus has his own claim that he wants to lay upon us. Look at what he says. Look at what he does. Jesus is on the side of the lost, the lonely, and the left behind. He is on the side of the poor, the outcast, and the sinner. He meets the crowd with compassion, the sick with healing, and the afflicted with comfort. He is unafraid to speak truth to power, and he refuses to make peace with oppression. And he expects his followers to do the same. Otherwise, who do they think they're following, and why do they bother? Who do you say that I am? Jesus didn't ask the disciples who he was, who they thought he was, as an intellectual exercise or even as a spiritual one. Following him was going to bring them into conflict with the status quo. When Paul and Silas took the gospel to Thessalonica, making disciples as they went, dismayed town people dragged the believers before the authorities, saying, "These people who've been turning the world upside down have come here also." They're acting contrary to the emperor and saying there's another king named Jesus. Do something about them. Following Jesus was not all smooth sailing, as the cross points out. Following Jesus was going to demand the disciples' full measure of devotion, and Jesus needed to know if their faith was up to the task. Jesus isn't asking the disciples or us for an intellectual response. He's asking for faith. But who do you say that I am? It's easy to get stuck in our head where God is concerned. We get all balled up wondering, I'm not sure who I think Jesus is. That's a tough question. I can't tell you the number of people who tell me they have problems with the creed. I'm like, friends, the creed is like the Reader's Digest version of the story. Don't let it worry you, okay? God is not heady. God is very down to earth, like literally. God came down to earth in Jesus Christ. We should too. Just a thought. If we wonder whether or not we think Jesus is who Peter says he is, the Messiah, the Son of the living God, we could start by just looking at what we say and do. We could start by looking at how we behave. We can look for data and see whether or not we've been following him. Are we acting like him? Are we doing what he did? Whether we have actually given him power over us, over how we think, over what we say, over what we do. For instance, how do we talk to other people? How do we treat them? Judging by how we relate to other people, what would other people say we believe about who Jesus is? What do our lives say? Faith isn't something we just think about in our heads. Faith is something we live in our lives. What does our behavior say about who Jesus is for us? You know the old wisecrack. If you were arrested for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Jesus is looking for our response because Jesus is looking for a relationship with us. Who we say Jesus is critical to that, because in any relationship, what we believe to be true about the other person determines what kind of relationship we can have with them. What we say about them, what we think about them, affects our behavior toward them and what's possible between us. So, how are things between us and God? How are you and God doing? Are we open to allowing God to touch us, to speak to us? Are we actually digging deep and getting into a relationship with God, or are we in relationship with some figment of our imagination or our fear? Is Jesus just someone we think about in passing on Sunday morning, or is he a part of our prayer and our lives? Do we know that Jesus accompanies us in all times and in all places? Or do we go to work and talk with friends and forget we're even Christians? These are important questions because nothing is out of the realm of God's concern or God's sovereignty. Nothing. If we're willing to draw near to these questions, honestly, with an open heart, it will bring us closer to Jesus, closer to the light, to the truth, to integrity, to honesty, to authenticity, to love, to life. Jesus wants us to be close to him. He wants us to share his passion and his power, his grace and his love. But not only for ourselves. He wants us to share it for the life and the healing of the world. Jesus is looking for followers. Jesus is looking for faith. As the great African-American laywoman and biblical scholar Verna Dozier, now of blessed memory, once said, "Don't tell me that you believe. Show me what difference it makes that you believe." I think the world is hungry for that, friends. We need to stop telling them what we believe and start showing them what we believe. And I think Jesus would agree. When God wanted to speak to the world, finally he spoke through a son. He spoke through a person. And he'll speak through us if we can let him get a word in edgewise. In everything we do, we're sharing and showing the world who Jesus is for us. In terms of the political, Jesus asked such a personal question in such a political place. For him, there is no separation. It's all one to God. He asks the disciples in the midst of all this history and power and politics and religion to focus on him. In the complex and compelling world of the pandemic and the national election and the quest for racial justice, Jesus says, "Look at me. Look at me." When Peter, loving, enthusiastic, sometimes clueless Peter, can be so present and so grounded in the moment as to look at this penniless, itinerant preacher from Galilee and say, "You are the Son of the living God," in the midst of the world's glory and power, something is going on. Something profound is at work. This is like Jesus as a baby in a manger, so cloaked in the ordinary that we could miss it, and often do in our search for something massive and overwhelming, which is everything around us all the time. Yet there he is, taking our hand. Jesus is talking to us, friends, in the midst of our political conventions, in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of our divisions, in the midst of our hopes and our fears. and all that seeks to draw our attention away from him. Jesus is saying, look at me. Listen to me. Where does your loyalty lie? To whom do you give your allegiance? Who do you say that I am? Amen.